She called me the unemployed one who lives off the family in front of her CEO at my own son's wedding, and she had no idea that man had spent 3 years searching every firm in the country for me. Keep watching, because the next 30 seconds are the moment my sister's entire career started dying, and she didn't even know it yet. My name is Rachel Whitfield. I'm 46 years old, and by the time this story ends, I will have turned down a fortune, a throne, and a public apology, and I will tell you exactly why. Stay to the end, because the biggest twist isn't what my sister did to me, it's what I chose to do back. Welcome to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet women nobody counts, right up until the room finds out exactly who it was talking to. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe, because you will want to see how this one ends. I spent most of that wedding standing at the edge of the reception hall, a glass of wine going warm in my hand. I've gotten good at edges. 3 years ago, I wouldn't have known where the edge of a room even was, because I was always at the center of one. Head of the table, the one everyone waited on. I ran strategy for companies whose names you'd recognize. Self-made, they used to call me, back when anyone bothered to call me anything. Now I was the woman by the coat check, watching my son Daniel laugh with his new wife, feeling the strange peace of someone who already lost the thing she feared most and survived it. Nobody at that reception knew I'd sat by a hospital bed for 2 years. To them, I was Vanessa's sister, the one without a job, the one you're kind to the way you're kind to a stray. I let them think it. Underestimation felt safe. But underestimation is a loan, not a gift. And somebody always comes to collect. Here's the twist you don't see coming yet. The collector was already in that room, and he wasn't there for me. Let me take you back 3 years, because the moment that started all of this took 11 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon. I was standing in a glass conference room 40 floors up, days from being named managing partner, 20 years of climbing about to pay off, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I stepped out half annoyed. She said pancreatic. Then she said stage 4. And 40 floors suddenly felt like nothing. She was 68. The doctors gave her a number, and it was small. I did the only math that mattered. Keep the door or keep the time. I walked back into that room and withdrew my name for managing partner, and I watched 20 years rearrange itself into something else entirely. That night I called my sister Vanessa, and she said something quick and light that I didn't understand for 3 full years. When I finally did understand it, I understood everything about her. But that reveal is coming. Hang tight, because it lands at the worst possible moment for her. Here's what people get wrong about me and my sister, we were both asked. When it became clear our mother couldn't be alone, the family had one of those chaotic speakerphone meetings, and somebody said it plainly, one of us had to step back. Vanessa was mid-level then, clawing up a firm she was terrified of falling out of. When the question landed, she said, I can't just throw away everything I've built. Fast. Rehearsed. And the ugly truth is I understood her. So I volunteered, half pride, half love, not knowing yet that the world keeps 2 different ledgers, one for the people who stay, and one for the people who leave. 2 years is a long time when it's measured in medication schedules. I learned oncology the way I once learned mergers, fluently and against my will. I sold my apartment for something smaller, so the money would stretch. I drove her to 6 a.m. appointments and learned which nurses were gentle and which were just fast. My phone, which used to buzz all day with people who needed my judgment, went quiet. Then it went dead. One night my mother surfaced from the fog with total clarity, held my hand, and said something I've carried like a stone ever since. They'll measure you by the room you're in. Don't you dare measure yourself the same way. I told her she was being dramatic. She told me she was dying and had earned the right. We both laughed, a real laugh. That was the last good week. She died that spring. And here's the part that should make you angry. At her funeral, people started talking about me in the past tense. An aunt patted my arm and said what a shame it was, how impressive I used to be. Vanessa flew in for 2 days, wore beautiful black, cried in a way that made people comfort her, and by the end of that reception, she was the grieving daughter, and I was the tired woman who'd been handling things. She told a cousin she was so worried about me, hoping I could find my footing again, as if I'd wandered off a path instead of carrying our mother to the end of hers. Nobody warns you about that part of caregiving. You give up the visible life, and the people with visible lives get to narrate what your invisible one was worth. And Vanessa was already writing her version, and in her version I wasn't the hero. I was the warning. Remember that word, warning, because it's about to come back around in front of a room full of strangers. A year passed. I did the paperwork of death, which is its own second job. I started sleeping again. Then my son Daniel called with the best news I'd had in years. He was marrying Clara, kind and steady, clearly good for him. But near the end of that call, he went quiet, and then he said the sentence that told me exactly where I stood now. Mom, Aunt Vanessa's going to be there, and she's got her whole thing about you being between jobs. Can you just not engage with it? For me, just one day. He was 24, terrified of a scene at his own wedding, and I could hear that he loved me and was ashamed of asking in the same breath. I said, "Of course, honey," and I meant it, but it cost me something, because in one small sentence, my own son had told me which sister was the problem to be managed. Not the one who mocked, the one who might mind being mocked. I sat in the quiet a long time. Then I asked him, gently, one more thing. Where did he work again? He said the name like it was nothing. Halden Strategy Group. I kept my voice even. Good firm, I said. He told me Vanessa had helped him get the interview. She was a manager there. He was just an analyst, learning a ton. I told him I was proud of him. I was. What I didn't tell him is what that name meant to me, because I knew Halden. I'd competed against them for a decade. And years ago, I'd built a framework, a way of mapping a company's real decisions against its stated ones, that spread through the industry the way good ideas do, uncredited everywhere. Last I'd heard, Halden had adopted a version of it wholesale until it became just house knowledge, the kind no one remembers ever had an author. My son was working inside the house I used to lay siege to, under a sister who'd built her whole career standing on top of something of mine without ever once thinking to ask whose it was. I could have told him that night. I chose not to. Not as a plan. I was just tired of explaining that I used to matter. I was going to a wedding to watch my son be happy. I owed no one my resume. But keep this in your pocket, because 3 days later, one man is going to say my name out loud and connect every single dot I just laid down for you. The rehearsal dinner was Friday, in a private room at a restaurant where waiters folded your napkin when you stood up. I wore the one good dress left from my old life and felt like a museum piece of myself. Vanessa walked in like she'd booked the place herself, new watch, newer confidence, and within 10 minutes she was holding court by the window, every story somehow ending with her being right. I found a chair near the edge, which by now felt less like exile and more like a vantage point. From the edge, you see who a person really is when they think the important people are watching. And all night, Vanessa kept glancing at the door, waiting for someone who mattered more than the rest of us. He didn't show up to the rehearsal dinner, but he showed up in every third sentence. My CEO, she kept saying. Marcus is incredibly selective. She told a long story about a deck he'd once rejected, how she stayed up all night fixing it and won him over. She said his name, Marcus Kane, like a saint she was hoping would notice her devotion. She dropped it in front of Clara's father. She dropped it in front of my son, who beamed with pride for his aunt. And she dropped it while looking dead at me, making sure I understood the distance between a woman who reported to Marcus Kane and a woman who reported to no one at all. I said nothing. The name meant nothing to me. I'd left the industry before his time at the top. But Vanessa didn't know that either. She just knew I used to be somebody, and now I was no one. She wanted the somebody in me to witness her ascent. She had no idea she was about to get an audience she never wanted. Clara's mother asked me kindly over the salad course, "And what do you do, Melanie?" "Sorry, Rachel." A simple, human question. I opened my mouth to answer honestly that I'd stepped back from consulting to care for my mother, that I was figuring out what came next. But Vanessa answered before I got a single word out. A light little laugh. "Oh, Rachel's between things right now. She's been between things for a while. Fond." That was the genius of the cruelty, wrapped in fondness, so anyone who flinched looked unkind for flinching. Clara's mother smiled uncertainly and moved on, and I sat there, introduced to my son's new family as a woman defined entirely by absence, as if 2 years spent holding a dying woman's hand were a gap in a resume instead of the fullest thing I'd ever done. I said, "That's one way to put it, Vanessa," and let it go, because it was Daniel's weekend. But I filed it. Some words you file. I stepped outside to breathe, and Clara followed me. She's the kind of person who notices when someone's gone quiet. She said, "Daniel told me you took care of your mom for a couple of years. That must have been really hard." That was it. That was the whole thing. She asked about the actual life I lived, instead of the empty space everyone else saw around it. I told her a little. She said, "That's not nothing. That's kind of everything." I had to look away at the string lights for a second. It's a strange thing, having your own son's wife be the first person in 3 years to hand you back a piece of yourself. When we went inside, Vanessa was mid-story again, and Clara caught my eye and made a small, private face that said, "I see it too." I had an ally now. I didn't know yet how much I'd need one, or how little I'd end up using her. The moment I keep replaying happened over dessert, and it happened with paper. Clara's father mentioned, in passing, that he might need consulting help down the line. Nothing serious, just thinking out loud. Vanessa moved like a shark that smelled the water change. She pulled out her business cards, Halden Strategy Group and Boston Navy, fanned them across the tablecloth like a winning hand, and slid them toward Clara's father with a smile. Then she turned to me. She let the pause sit just long enough for the whole table to feel it. "Do you have one to give them, Rachel? Anything at all?" The table went quiet in that specific way. Everyone understood the real question. Did I exist? I didn't have a card. I'd left my old ones in a drawer 3 years ago and never made new ones, because I didn't yet know what they'd say. I sat there empty-handed in front of my son's new family, while my sister's little Navy cards lay fanned across the linen like proof of who was real. I smiled and said, "No, I'm fresh out." Vanessa smiled back, satisfied. If you've ever sat in a room holding nothing while someone spread their cards like a winning hand, you know that exact sound silence makes. Tell me in the comments if you felt it too. Because this next part is where everything quietly starts to turn. That night, back in my apartment, I took down a box from the closet. Not documents, nothing I could wave in Vanessa's face. Just a photograph. My mother and me at an industry conference 15 years back, laughing at something outside the frame. She used to fly in just to watch me give keynotes she didn't understand a word of and beam from the back row. I sat on the floor and asked myself the question I'd been outrunning for 3 years. If I don't produce anything, am I anything? If no one's measuring me, do I still count? Ugly question. It meant part of me had started believing Vanessa's math, the world's math, the arithmetic that says a woman with no title has no worth. I didn't cry. I just let the question be honest, because you can't fix a rot you refuse to name. My mother's voice came back to me. Don't you dare measure yourself the same way. I put the photo in my purse. I don't know why. I just wanted her at the wedding. The morning of the wedding, Daniel needed help with his tie, the way he always has. I did the knot the way my own father taught me. His hands were shaking with nerves. He looked at me in the mirror, and his face crumpled slightly. "Mom, about what I asked you about Aunt Vanessa. That wasn't fair of me." I told him it was fine. I said, "Honey, this is your day, and I am not going to be a single ounce of trouble in it. That's a promise, and I mean it as a gift, not a sacrifice." He hugged me too hard, the way he used to when he was small and scared of thunder. I had promised him peace. What I didn't know yet was that peace wasn't mine to keep or break. Someone else was about to reach for the pin, and it wasn't going to be me. The ceremony was beautiful and short. Then came the reception. Long, open-sided hall, grapevines on the posts, string lights against the dusk. I was seated well back, with a great-aunt and 2 of Clara's college friends, the back tables, for the people the day wasn't performing for. From there, I watched Vanessa work the room, orbiting one man all evening. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, a suit that fit like it had been grown, not bought. Calm the way genuinely powerful people are calm. She refreshed his drink. She laughed half a second too long at everything he said. I didn't recognize him, but I recognized the choreography because I used to be the person a room arranged itself around. I knew exactly what it looks like when someone wants badly to be arranged around. Then Vanessa spotted me at my little back table and started walking my way with him in tow. I knew what was coming the way you know weather. And I want you to remember this moment, because in about 90 seconds, this exact walk across the room is going to be the biggest mistake of my sister's career. She arrived glowing, gestured at me like a hostess presenting a curiosity, and turned to the silver-haired man to make her introduction. I straightened my back the way I used to before walking into a hostile boardroom, old muscle memory from a life these people thought I never had. Clara saw the trajectory, and started moving too, though she was too far to matter yet. My son was near the head table, laughing, unaware. And my sister, so certain of the floor beneath her, opened her mouth. Marcus, this is my sister I was telling you about. Rachel, the unemployed one. Lives off the family. Been between things for years now. Bless her! Smiling, as if it were affection. The great aunt beside me inhaled sharply. One of Clara's friends looked at her plate, and I did the thing I'd trained myself to do for 3 years of being narrated by people who were never in the room. I laughed, gentle, not bitter. Then I looked at the man, Marcus, and said the truest, quietest thing I could, the thing that closed one door even as it opened another. She's right. I don't have a title anymore. I meant it as surrender. You win, Vanessa. I'm done fighting the story. But some sentences turn in your mouth the second they leave it, because the words stopped sounding like an apology the instant they landed. Watch what happens next, because this is the exact second my sister's world starts collapsing, and she has no idea it's already begun. Across the table, the calm man went very still. He set his glass down on the linen, slow and deliberate, and looked at me the way no one had looked at me in 3 years, like I was a person worth focusing on. I'm sorry, he said, ignoring my sister entirely. I don't think we've met properly. What did you say your name was? Something in his voice had shifted, low, courteous, suddenly very attentive. Rachel, I said. Vanessa jumped in to fill the space, because Vanessa cannot bear a space. Whitfield. She's a Whitfield, like me, obviously. She laughed again, trying to pull the conversation back onto rails she controlled. But his eyes didn't leave my face. Rachel Whitfield, he repeated slowly, and I watched a file get pulled from some deep shelf behind his eyes. Not the Rachel Whitfield. Not the one who wrote the decision-mapping framework. The great aunt looked confused. Vanessa's smile developed a hairline crack, because those were not words she ever expected to hear attached to the sister she'd spent years shrinking. My pulse was in my ears. I wrote a version of it, I said carefully. A long time ago. And Marcus Kane, CEO of the very firm my sister was terrified of falling out of, exhaled something close to a laugh and shook his head. A long time ago. My entire analytics division still runs on your long time ago. The table went completely silent. He told it simply, which somehow made it worse for Vanessa. Halden had adopted my framework firm-wide years back, the backbone of how they made decisions, in his words. And 3 years ago, when he took over as CEO, the very first outside hire he wanted to make was the woman who built it. Every recruiting cycle for 3 years, I had my team put your name back at the top of the list and try again, he said. You'd gone completely off the map. No firm, no board seats, nothing. I assumed someone had poached you and buried you in an NDA, or you'd gone overseas. I couldn't understand how someone that good just vanishes. I said evenly, my mother got sick. I went to take care of her. She died last year. The words landed in that quiet hall with a weight even Vanessa couldn't talk over. Marcus looked at me a long moment. So while I had a team searching every firm in the country for you, you were where exactly? At a hospital, then a funeral, then figuring out what came next. He nodded slowly, and something in his face moved from professional interest to something closer to respect. Beside him, my sister turned the exact shade of gray that comes when a story you've told for years collapses in a single sentence, in front of the one person you most needed it to hold. Here's where Vanessa had a choice, and I want to be fair, because there was a version of this where she recovered gracefully. She could have said, of course, I'm so proud of my sister, look what she stepped away from. She could have let the truth reframe her as the family member of someone remarkable. But Vanessa had spent so many years needing me to be small that she couldn't stop reaching for the shears even as the ground gave out beneath her. She let out a nervous laugh. Well, I mean, that was ages ago, Marcus. She's not really in the industry anymore. Been out for years. You know how it is. The field moves on. Reflexive, dismissive, said to her own CEO about a woman he just called the backbone of his firm, 30 seconds after introducing that same woman as an unemployed loser who lived off the family. And I watched Marcus Kane turn his head slowly and really look at her, the way you reread a document and finally catch what you missed the first time. The warmth left his face, not into anger, into something colder and far more final. He set down the drink she'd refreshed all night, and the whole hall seemed to hold its breath, forks suspended, string lights humming, nearby tables now openly watching. This next part, I promise you, is the part everyone in the comments is going to be talking about. "Vanessa," he said, and his voice was quiet enough that people leaned in without meaning to. "I've heard you talk about people at the office." I told myself it was ambition. Sharp elbows. I gave you room. A pause. But I just watched you introduce your own sister, a woman our entire firm is indebted to, as an unemployed loser, at her son's wedding to impress me. That tells me everything I needed to know and didn't want to. Vanessa started to say his name. "Marcus, please." And he raised one hand, not unkindly. "Just final. This isn't the place, and I won't make it one. But HR will be in touch first thing Monday. I think you already know why." He said it the way you'd note the time. No shouting. No scene. The most powerful man in the room had simply, calmly ended her, not because I was brilliant, but because she was cruel. There's a difference. Everyone at that table felt it. Vanessa made a sound I'd never heard from her, small, airless. And here's what surprised even me. I didn't feel the rush I expected. No hot flood of vindication. I watched my sister's face come apart in front of Clara's family and my son, and what moved through me instead was something heavier and stranger, because one quiet sentence had just unmade a woman who thought a title made her untouchable, and I realized, watching her, that I didn't actually want her unmade. I wanted something else. I just hadn't found the words for it yet. Keep that thought, because what I do in the next 5 minutes is the real twist of this entire story. Not what happened to my sister, but what I chose to do about it. The table erupted quietly, the way tables do at weddings. Whispers, shifting chairs, someone hurrying to find Daniel. My son appeared, wide-eyed, looking between his aunt, his mother, and his boss, trying to understand how his wedding had turned into this. Clara reached me first, one hand light on my shoulder, a young woman planting herself beside the family member everyone else had spent years treating as furniture. I will love her for that until I die. Vanessa sat down heavily, as if her legs had simply quit. For 1 second, she wasn't performing. She looked at me, across the wreckage of her own making, and something naked crossed her face. "You were always the one they remembered," she said, almost to herself. It came out of her like something she'd been holding underwater for 40 years. And in that single sentence, I finally understood what she'd said on the phone 3 years earlier, the thing I couldn't parse until now. She hadn't refused to care for our mother because she was heartless. She refused because she was terrified that if she stepped out of her lit room for even a moment, the world would forget she existed at all, because it had always defaulted to noticing me instead. Her cruelty was never strength. It was a woman clutching a rung in the rain, certain that letting go meant vanishing. I stood up. Everyone probably expected me to say something to her, some final line to close the account. I didn't. Instead, I walked over to Marcus Kane and asked for a word. We stepped away from the table, near a post wrapped in grapevine and lights. "That was remarkable," he started. "What you built, I owe you." I stopped him gently. "Mr. Kane, I need to ask you something, and it's going to sound strange." He waited. "Don't fire my sister because of me." He tilted his head. "If she's crossed a line your firm draws, that's your business, and you should do what your business requires. But I need to know it wasn't a gift to me. I've spent 3 years being defined by other people. I'm not going to start my next chapter by having a woman destroyed on my behalf. That's not a win I want to own." He studied me a long moment, the way you study something you weren't expecting to find. And I realized, saying it, that I wasn't only talking about Vanessa anymore. I was drawing a line about the entire way I'd let the world hand me things from now on, insult or reward, and I meant to be the one holding the pen. This next offer he made me is the biggest test of the entire story, and most people would have said yes without thinking twice. Marcus was quiet, then smiled, the first real one I'd seen from him. "You're exactly the person I spent 3 years looking for," he said. "And now I understand why I couldn't find you. People like you don't leave a trail. You leave a legacy and walk off." Then he got serious. He wanted me at Halden, not a consulting gig, a leadership seat, running strategy for the entire firm. He named a salary big enough that the great-aunt, still eavesdropping, made a small noise. He said Halden would announce it however I wanted, that he'd personally make sure the industry knew Rachel Whitfield was back, the record corrected in a single press release. Everything the last 3 years had quietly taken, restored in an afternoon. Then to seal it, he pulled out his own business card, heavy stock, his name, his title, and set it on the little cocktail table between us. A card. After an entire weekend of not having one to give, a man was placing the best card in the room in front of me, offering to make me real again on his terms. I want to tell you I didn't consider it. That would be a lie, and this story's had enough of those. I considered it hard. Everything in me that had gone hungry for 3 years leaned toward that card. Take it, said that part of me. Take the title, the salary, the press release. Walk back into your old life vindicated. Let the whole industry that watched you vanish, watch you return in triumph. Let Vanessa read about it. By every measure I'd used for 20 years, this was the win, the door I'd walked away from, swinging open a second time. And this time, nobody was dying. I could just say yes. Clara's father would get his consultant. My son would have a mother with a title again. The great-aunt would revise her past 10 sentences. Everything I'd wanted at the start of that weekend was sitting on a cocktail table in one small rectangle. But wanting a thing and needing it are 2 different accounts, and my mother taught me how to read a balance sheet. Because if I took that card, I'd once again be a woman whose worth arrived from the outside, granted by a powerful man, printed on stock I didn't choose, restored on someone else's letterhead. I'd be real again the exact way Vanessa measured real. I'd win her game, and a person who wins someone else's game has still agreed to play it. I heard my mother, clear as that last good week. They'll measure you by the room you're in. Don't you dare measure yourself the same way. I finally understood, completely, what she'd been trying to hand me. I'd spent my whole life believing my value was whatever I produce for other people, build the framework, close the deal, run the room, and you're worth the applause you generate. Stop producing, and you're between things. That was the arithmetic. It was the same arithmetic that made Vanessa refuse our mother. The same one that had her clutching her Navy cards like a life raft. The same one that had nearly convinced me, alone on my apartment floor with an old photograph, that a woman with no title is a woman with no worth. But I had done the most valuable work of my entire life in a room with no applause at all. 2 years no one clapped for, no one credited, no one put on a resume, and it hadn't been a gap. It had been the fullest, truest work I've ever done. The world called those years empty. The world was wrong, and I'd almost believe the world over my own 2 hands. My mother wasn't telling me to build a bigger room than my sister. She was telling me to stop letting the room do the measuring at all. I picked up Marcus Kane's card. I held it a moment, so he'd know I understood exactly what I was refusing. Then I set it back down and slid it gently across the table to him. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it with my whole chest. "You have no idea what it means that you remembered. You saw me when my own family had already decided I was a cautionary tale. I'll carry that." He waited, because good negotiators know when there's more coming. But I'm not going to take the seat. And it isn't pride. I chose my words the way I once chose them for boardrooms, except now they were only for me. You offered to restore me, correct the record, put me back where I belonged. But I didn't lose myself out there, Marcus. I didn't get lost. This room just forgot how to see. And that was never my failing to fix by taking a better chair. I don't need to be restored. I need to build my own table, one where the first question isn't what's your title, it's who did you take care of. He was quiet a long moment. Then Marcus Kane did something I'll always respect him for. He laughed softly, put his card away, and said, "Most people take the chair, Rachel. In 30 years, you're the first one I've ever offered it to who'd rather build the room." He put out his hand. "Then I'll be your first client. And don't worry, I heard you about your sister. What I do about Vanessa, I'm doing for my firm, not for you. Exactly as you asked. That distinction is yours." I shook his hand. I had walked into that reception with nothing to give anyone, and I walked out having turned down everything, and I had never in my life felt richer. I found my son near the cake with Clara, looking like a boy whose beautiful day had just cracked down the middle. I took both his hands and told him his wedding was still perfect, that none of this was his to carry, and that his mother was more okay than she'd been in 3 years, which was true. He asked quietly if it was awful what he'd walked into. "No, honey," I said. "I think it was the opposite of awful. I think it was the night your mother got herself back." Clara hugged me, and over her shoulder I looked across the hall to where Vanessa sat alone at the empty table, her Navy cards nowhere in sight, staring at nothing. I didn't go to her. There was no repairing that night. Maybe not any night, and I'd made my peace with that. But I caught her eye, and I didn't gloat, and I didn't glare. I gave her one small nod. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. Two sisters, raised in the same house, under the same rules about who gets to matter, and only one of us had just walked free of them. She looked away first. Later, when the dancing started and no one needed me, I stepped out into the vineyard dark, the music leaking out behind me. I took my mother's photo out of my purse and looked at it under the string lights, the two of us laughing at that long-ago conference, and told her quietly that I finally understood what she'd been trying to give me, and that I was sorry it took me this long. For 3 years I had walked out of rooms, feeling myself grow smaller in the doorway, the invisible arithmetic subtracting me a little more each time. That night, I walked out of a room feeling exactly my own size for the first time since she died. No title, no card. I had turned down a fortune and a throne, and I stood in the dark holding a photograph of a dead woman, and I was not between things. I was finally at the start of my own thing. That was a little over a year ago. Here's what became of everyone, because I know you want to know, and the last update is the one that's going to stay with you the longest. I built the table I told Marcus about. Whitfield's strategy is small, deliberately, 3 people, a handful of clients. Marcus Kane was true to his word and became the first of them, which opened doors I never had to knock on twice. Not an empire. I don't want one. I've already lived the version of my life that chases the biggest room, and I'm not going back. This firm is enough. It's mine, and it measures the right things. Vanessa left Halden that Monday. The industry is small. People talk, and the story followed her for a while before she landed at a smaller firm in another city, a rung lower, still clutching. We're not close. I've stopped pretending we will be. Some breaks don't heal into something stronger. They just heal enough to stop bleeding, and you learn to live with the scar and the distance. The world's arithmetic didn't change either. It still worships the title and calls the caregivers years a gap. I've stopped trying to fix that, but Daniel and Clara come for dinner often now. Clara's pregnant, and my son hugs me like a man who finally knows exactly what his mother is worth. That's the fallout. Smaller than a fairy tale, truer than one. The 3 years I was taught to call a gap turned out to be the fullest thing I ever did, and a person's worth was never the kind of thing that fits on a card you can fan across a table. Last week, I interviewed a woman for my firm who'd been out of work 3 years, caring for her father. Her hands shook when she reached the gap on her resume, braced for the question everyone always asks. I didn't ask about the gap. I asked her to tell me about her dad. She started to cry, and then she started to talk, and I knew I was hiring her before she finished a single sentence. A card, a laugh, a quiet man setting down his glass. If there's a quiet woman in your life carrying more than the room can see, tell her today. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to Revenge Stories, because the next one might be the one that finally puts words to what you've been carrying too. I'll see you there.